with that, I'm happy to kick off another edition of the Coach's Corner. And this is the part of the podcast where I, Demetrius, Jelatis, get to try to help you guys take your pool game to the next level. I have been doing that one-on-one with students that fly out to Minnesota and train with me. More information, www.mnpoolbootcamp.com. It's been a lot of fun. So today I want to talk a little bit about goals, and I think I'm going to make this a two-parter because I think today I want to talk a little bit. I want to introduce something that I call the commander and the soldier, or the captain and the soldier, I guess I could call it. I want to talk a little bit about different kinds of goals and what the best way to put them together is. And then I think next week I want to get back to it and talk a little bit about some common mistakes people make that interfere with their ability to perform. So with that, I'll just say, I think that some people know this, but a lot of people don't really know the different kinds of goals and which are good in which spots. It's almost like different types of side spin or knowing the right pattern to play. So when I think of goals, there are long-term result goals that you can have where, maybe you want to get to where you're the best player in your league, or maybe you want to get to where you win a local tournament against some of the top local players, or maybe you want to cash in a pro event, or you want to run 100 balls in straight pool. These are examples of result goals. These are results that you would like to achieve with your pool game. And those are important because you have to have a picture of where you want to go. The problem comes with if you're playing a game of pool and you're focused on results, that creates a lot of pressure and it can interfere with performance. And the reason for that is because the result goals are not within your short-term control. So when you're at the table, I guess you could divide things into categories of what you can control and what you can't control. And what you can control at the table are things like, breathing, and things like making good decisions, or how much effort you give, or what your attitude is, or how you react to the adversity in front of you, different things like that. But you can't control whether you make balls in the break, whether you run out every table, whether you win the match. You certainly can't control what your opponent does, or how they play, some of the things that happen, and you can't really control the results of that match. So one problem is when people are really focused on results. I really want to beat this guy. I really want to win. This is my time. I want to win this tournament. When you're really focused on results, because that's not in your control, when you give a lot of emotional attachment to something outside of your control, it creates anxiety and it creates doubt and fear and frustration. It doesn't lead itself to a great performance. It might be motivating. You might be fired up to play hard, but ultimately it's just not good. You're like, I want this stuff. It's almost like when I don't know about you guys listening, but for me, when I'm watching somebody else play pool, I get more nervous than when I'm playing myself, because when you're watching somebody else play pool, you have zero control over what they're going to do. Like my daughter would be playing in leagues and I'd be watching her games and I'd just be sitting there and I'm helpless. I don't know if she's going to shoot the right shot. I don't know if she's going to follow the 8-ball in. So it's like when you're the same way, when you're focused on things out of your control, it makes you anxious. And so as opposed to result goals, we have what we call process goals. And those are the things I mentioned that are entirely in your control in the short term. So whether it's, hey, I want to make sure I'm using a smooth stroke on every shot, or I want to make sure that I'm going through my pre-shot routine. Whatever your process goals are, things that you can absolutely control. And they may not control the result, because nothing can control the result short term. But you can at least give yourself the best chance. You can influence to your fullest. You can influence the outcome of that match. And so again, you've got process goals, or things you can control in the short term, and that's where your focus should be when you're competing. And then that takes a lot of pressure off. When you're no longer saying, I need to win this match, I have to beat this guy, I have to win this tournament. It's like, no, you can't control that. That creates pressure. You focus on your processes, and that creates confidence because you can actually influence that. Interesting note, I had a student ask me about pocketing balls. He says, well, you can control that. That's in your control. And we had a very cool conversation about whether or not pocketing balls was in your control. He was of the camp that it was, and I'm more of the camp that you actually can't control pocketing balls, because if you could, then you'd pocket them every time. And it's an interesting conversation, but I don't think it is. I think that you should be focused on things that are process-based, meaning what you're trying, your effort, your attitude, your stroke, your breathing, your pre-shot routine, your decision-making. Those types of things are good process goals. So then I've seen people get really, really excited about that. Like, hey, process goals are the best. I just want to not be result-oriented. I want to focus on processes, because if I can do those processes right, then the great things will happen for me. But you still need result goals, because otherwise, if you don't have result goals, what are those processes for? And how do you make sure that you have the right processes? If you don't have an external benchmark to measure against, you could sit there and be, process minded all day. But if in a year, 2 years, 3 years, if you're not hitting goals and getting better, then what are the processes being built to do, and how do you know if they're working? You have to have result goals to have a vision that you're driving towards, so that you give structure to what you're trying to build with your processes. And so one analogy I use to kind of help people with this is, nowadays we have GPS. So let's go back in time to when we used when I grew up, we used road atlases. If I wanted to drive to a tournament in Louisville, Kentucky for Derby, I would get out my road atlas and I'd say, okay, here's where I'm at. Here's where I want to drive to. And so before I drove, I would map out my road. I would say, well, I'm going to be on this highway for 150 miles. So I know that once I'm in my car for a few hours, then I'll have to be starting to look out for this other highway. But now that I have a general route planned, guess what I'm going to do? When I get in my car, I'm putting away the road atlas, and I'm going to focus on the car in front of me, staying in my lane, the speedometer, the gas gauge, things like that. What I'm not going to be doing is driving in my car with the road atlas open and in between me and the windshield. I'm staring at the road saying, am I there yet? Am I there yet? Because if I'm staring at that atlas, asking myself if I'm there yet, there's a very good chance that I will hit the car in front of me or go off the road. And so you can't be driving with the atlas in your face. When you're driving, you need to be focused on operating the car and trust that as long as you mapped out your road right, you will get there. On the other hand, you can't. So that would be the example of focusing on process goals. So you can't play a match thinking about, are you going to hit your goals? Is this going to be your breakthrough tournament? Are you ever going to run 100 balls in straight pool? Is this your time? I need to get there today. Like, all those types of result thoughts are like having the atlas in front of your face when you're trying to drive. You can't be thinking about all that. You have to be focused on the here and now and the process of what you're trying to do. On the other hand, if you don't have result goals that you're laser focused on and hungry to hit, that would be like me getting in the car without having consulted the atlas and just saying, well, I'm not going to be one of these result guys that has the atlas in my face. I'm not going to be the sucker that crashes because I'm staring at the atlas. I'll just jump in my car and drive and play some good music and drive around and feel good and be intuitive. And I'm sure, it's a small country. I'm sure I'll end up in Louisville at some point. Like, no, it's a very big country. And the odds of you getting where you want to go without having a clear vision and path to get there are almost none. So yes, in the big picture, in the long term, results are very important, and you have to set your clear targets, map out a way to get there, build a plan to get there. And then once you've built that plan, once you screw your cue together, you have to be focused on the processes. So long term, you build out your goal, but you also build out what processes am I going to execute, and what, both on the table and managing my career in terms of tournaments I play, number of opportunities, people I play, practice I do. You map it all out. You figure out how it's going to get there. And then once you put your cue together, you focus on the things on the table. And then you have to go process only at that point. Once you put your cue together, results are out of the picture, because they're only going to derail you from the here and now and the things you can control, the things that build confidence, and the things that will actually propel you towards that success. And so I talk about this mix of long-term and short-term. As we get into next week, I'll talk about the captain and the soldier. The captain is the guy that sets the long-term plans. The soldier is the person fighting the short-term battles. And what I want to talk about next week is the relationship between the two, and some of the many mistakes I've seen people make that derail their performance, either in the short term or in their career, because they don't really understand some of, if you have a dysfunctional relationship between your long-term goals and your short-term goals, then that's where you see a lot of problems. So this week I wanted to set it up by making sure everyone knew what, long-term goals look like, what short-term goals look like. Process versus results. Results, long-term, out of your control. Short-term is process, completely in your control. And if you kind of have that picture of the road atlas and the driver, then as we get in next week, I can talk about some of the areas where I've seen people break down and some of the things you can do to make sure these things are working for you so that you're motivated, focused, and deliver your best foot forward to actually make progress towards your goals. So once again, I appreciate it. And if you have questions, feel free to email me, info@mnpoolbootcamp.com. I love it. Thanks for supporting the podcast, and talk to you guys next week.
And now for part 2. Welcome to another edition of the Coach's Corner. Demetrius Jelatis here with MN Pool Bootcamp. You can check out my website at www.mn, like for Minnesota, mnpoolbootcamp.com. Run these 3-day boot camps for people all over the country where you can come work on your game and leave not only a different level player, but never see the pool table the same way again. All right, moving on. This is the second part of my commander versus soldier conversation about process versus result goals. And so if you didn't catch the first half, check out last week, because I was going into the first half, talked a bit about process goals versus result goals, how process goals are your short-term and outcome goals are your long-term goals, and a little bit about that. So this week, I want to talk about the relationship between the two, and this is really, really important. This is all great in theory, but like, what are the problems that this helps solve? People, let me just talk about why this is important before I go into it. People always ask me questions about like, well, what do you do when you play a better player? And how do you keep from getting nervous, or how do you do this or that? And how do you handle, and it's like, there's like, oh, well, you just play the table. It's like, no. So there's a lot of problems that people have that can be fixed by having the right outlook on what we're doing here. And a lot of that comes down to how the process and the long-term outcomes go together. So catch the first episode if you haven't, or if you have, I'd recommend you listen to it so you're fresh. But moving on, the key is the relationship. So the commander is the long-term guy. He's looking at the big picture. His job, he's there to win the war. And so there's going to be a lot of battles in the war, but he's there to win the war, and the war is the long-term outcomes. Those are your long-term goals that you want to control. So that's what the commander's job is. How am I going to win this war? And in that war, he's going to have a lot of battles. And in those battles, he's going to have the soldier fight a lot of fights. And that's the short term. So the commander and the soldier each have a role. The commander's job is the commander's job is to make sure that he has and here's the word, foolproof. It's got to be a foolproof plan to win the war. That is the commander's job. How can I make sure that at the end of this war, we win the war? Like, we're going to lose battles, we're going to lose soldiers, but at the end, man, we will win this war. It has to be a foolproof plan, and you'll see why in a second. So that's his job. And then the soldier's job is to go into battle and fight and be willing to die for his troops, his country, his leader. And he has to just go fight to the death. And then if the commander has a foolproof plan, and if the soldier trusts his commander and goes in and fights to the death in every battle, there will be battles lost, but the war will be won. So what are the mistakes that people make? And how does this perspective change, solve some of these problems that people tell me they have? Well, a big mistake that people make is that they don't have a realistic foolproof goal. So maybe their goal is, I would say that it's people a lot of times they come up with an unrealistic goal, and or they don't budget for mistakes and losses. And so that's just not good, because what happens is, if the commander says, okay, here's my plan, and I've heard this, man, I've heard this, it's silly what people come up with for goals, but it's like, if the commander says, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go play a bunch of pool tournaments, and you're never going to miss a ball, and you're never going to lose a match, and you're going to win every match, make every ball, and beat everybody, and always win. That's how we're going to win the war. Well, that doesn't make any sense. It's like the Wookiee defense. You could Google it, look it up on YouTube. The Wookiee defense. It's Chewbacca. This is Chewbacca. It does not make sense. Okay, so how's that? So what happens when you have an unrealistic goal and you haven't budgeted for loss? What does that do to the soldier? The soldier is supposed to, he's fighting his battle. He's playing the games. You turn into the soldier as soon as you screw your cue together. You're supposed to be focused on fighting to the death and focusing on your processes, right? Well, okay, so you screw your cue together. I'm like, I'm process-minded. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh, but wait, if I play my best, that's not good enough. The only way I can hit my long-term goals, apparently, is to never miss a ball and never lose a game. That's pressure, man. I don't know if I can do that. And so that leads to a tremendous pressure, fear of exposure, doubt, and then despair, hopelessness, frustration, and, it's a lack of trust in your commander. Like, why did my commander send me out here to die? I can't do this, and this is all for nothing, and this pain and suffering I'm going through is pointless because I'm never going to get anywhere, and I can't do everything. How can I possibly do this? And this is, all those different negative emotions, and then just all the negative emotions for us, and then in the end he hates his commander. He's like, that commander's stupid, and then it leads to feeling like I've got to do more than my best. My best isn't good enough, and that's a horrible thing. All these things, it's horrible to be thinking my best isn't good enough. I'm never going to hit my goals. If I miss this ball, it's all over for me. And it's just, how are you going to play well? I don't understand. How are you going to focus on your process goals? It doesn't make any sense. So instead. Suppose the commander budgets for loss and has a foolproof plan where it's like, we're going to go to these tournaments, you're going to practice, you're going to journal about what your mistakes you made, you're going to practice those mistakes at home, you're going to watch videos and then practice them and play with your buddies and try to spar and work on those things, and then you're going to go run it again in the next tournament, and you're still going to accept that it might take a little bit longer than you wish it would take, and that we don't know exactly how long it's going to take, so we're going to be very, very conservative on our expectations here, but we're going to keep doing this because I believe this is a winning plan. And if I stick to this plan, I will get here at some point, and that's exciting to me. And it's realistic enough. A goal I don't want to get into goal setting, but a goal has to be believable, but exciting. It's got to be exciting enough to motivate you, but realistic enough to be believable. Otherwise, if you don't believe it, then it's not going to be exciting. In order for it to be exciting, it's got to be believable, but it's got to be big enough to be exciting and realistic enough to be believable. So if you set up a goal like that and you lay out a foolproof plan, then the soldier can look at that and say, well, that's great. I could just go play pool. And I don't have to worry about making every ball and winning every match because I have trust in my commander. And so as long as I play my hardest and as long as I try to win this war, even if I fall in battle today, we're going to win the war. And that is comforting. That's a comforting thought. And so whenever you have a thought that says, well, you might miss this ball, as a soldier, you can just say, yep, I might. Well, you might lose this match. Yep, that could happen. Okay, but that's not really what I'm worried about here. What I'm worried about is I'm going to take a deep breath, make a good decision, and now I'm going to try to swing my cue through straight, or whatever it is that your process is. And so to me, that's where you want to play from. So that the soldier has to trust his commander. The soldier's job is to focus on process and trust his commander. But the commander's job is to make it a foolproof plan that warrants the soldier's trust. And that's it. It's the relationship has to be very trusting between them. And it hinges on a realistic plan that the soldier can believe in enough to die in. So a couple examples of how that comes up. So say people are like, oh, how do you play against a better player? Okay, well, with a losing plan, without a good realistic goal, then you might just go into that and be like, oh, I need to beat this guy. How am I ever going to do that? Well, if I beat him, then I prove that I'm the kind of guy that can beat this player. And if I don't, then I guess I'm still just that lousy loser. And it's like when your entire belief in your plan and your entire belief in yourself as a player hinges on the outcome of something you can't control, that's not good. But with this mindset, you can say, you know what? I know that I have a winning plan. I'm going to practice my thing. I'm going to get in the ring. I'm going to play players like this more and more often in tournaments. I'm probably going to lose a lot of matches at different times, but eventually I will become a player that can win matches off these guys. At first, never, then sometimes, then often. And so I'm on the road to getting there, and this is a step there, and I'm excited and proud of myself for taking a step in that direction. And so I don't have to beat this player today. So how do I play better players? I don't have to beat that player. All I have to do is die trying. That's all I have to do is die trying. And it's inevitable because my plan is foolproof. So I can't guarantee anything in the short term, but that's why I don't try to. I just try to focus on my process. But I'm confident. So I can get up there and I can lose and I can miscue and I can choke and I can lose to these players. And that's fine because I've budgeted for that. And I know that's going to happen. And I'm just excited to be on a road where it's inevitable that some good things are going to happen for me too at sometimes. And so that's awesome. So when I play a better player, I just look at it like I'm probably going to lose. I'm probably going to die in battle today. But every time I make a ball and every time I win a game against this better player, like nothing bad can happen. I can get beat 11-0. I can not make a ball. That's fine. But every ball I make and every game I win is one step closer to my goal. It's one less enemy survivor that can go on and go raid my city and attack my family and my countrymen. So I'm here to die. I'm willing to give my life in battle today to take out as many of these suckers as I can. Like that's kind of my mindset. And if I'm prepared, and I'm prepared to die in battle because I trust my commander. So that's how I look at playing better players. And then as far as the only other thing is, I have seen people, and it's rare, but I have seen people take the process goals too far, where they're so process minded that they're afraid to be competitive, or they're afraid to they almost get to the point where they're like just kind of stroking into a Coke bottle, waiting for their game to come together, kind of a thing, where it's like, I'll just do my processes and then I'll let it come together. But here's the thing. You have to want to win today. And so this is where it's kind of sounds like a contradiction. How do you want to win today, but then not care if you win? It's like, no, you don't. I thought of this. It's what happened is I played a match where I thought about that. I really wanted to win this match. If I won this match, it would have been something I've never done before in pool. And I remember really, really wanting it. But then I asked myself, which is more important? Like, I want to be the player that can win a match like this someday. And I realized today might not be my day. Maybe today is not the day I can win a match like this. But that's okay, as long as I know that someday I will win this match. So as long as I know someday I'll win this match, I'm okay not winning it today. However, the only way that I'll know that someday I will win this match is if I try really, really hard to make it today. Because if I don't try my hardest, and I'm not going to grow, and then I'll never be the player that wins a match like this. So I have to want it so bad that I try my hardest to make it today, but then be okay with the fact that it might not be. And so this is, I don't know if that makes sense. You might have to listen to it twice. It's hard to talk about these ideas, especially one way into a podcast and a non-conversation. But what I would say is that I stumbled across a Vince Lombardi quote, the famous coach, and he actually said, winning isn't everything. The will to win is everything. And I thought about that. I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I've been trying to say. It's not important whether or not I win today. Because as long as, it is important that I am trying my hardest to win today. Because as long as I'm dying trying to win today, then I know I'll win at some point. And so that I don't have to win today. So it's a little circular. As long as I'm willing to die trying to win today, it'll happen eventually. And if it doesn't happen today, I don't care because it'll happen eventually. But the only way it'll happen eventually is if I do everything in my power to make it today. So that's how I play better players. I die trying to win and take out every ball I can. Well, not at all caring if it actually is today or not, because I know my success is inevitable, because I trust my commander, because I have a foolproof plan with a goal that's realistic but still exciting, and I just want to keep swinging the bat until I get there. So that is how the relationship between the commander and the soldier needs to function. There needs to be a lot of trust, realism on the part of the commander, good strategy, and then good faith and trust on the soldier's part. And that's how you can use that to navigate through situations and sink other people. So a lot can be said more about this. I'm sure I'll talk about other mental game stuff. If you have questions, email me, info@mnpoolbootcamp.com. But for now, I will say, thank you for supporting the podcast, and hope you give your soldier every opportunity to have a fun next battle. Take care.